History right here, guys. Moran Bay, that's the church. And this is what is left of the courthouse, the remains of Paul Bogle. The statue was erected on that black and white stand. And I'm here with DuPont Primary and Infants in Kingston, 3 miles. So this is what is left. Remember, the courthouse was burnt down. Paul Bogle and his men marched. There was a protest and they did not get their rights, or they didn't get what they wanted to be done. They weren't listened to. They got angry, they burned the courthouse, and you know that Paul Bogle and George William Gordon, they were hanged. And so here we are on the plot of ground. Here we are at the back of the courthouse, and we also have a fort which faces the sea, where they used to war with other ships coming in on the Caribbean. The British and the Spanish warred with each other for Jamaica. And so this is a fort. This is a cannon gun. You can see the cannon gun there. Cannon gun. And this is history, showing the old machinery, the old artillery, old guns that they used to war with enemy ships coming in on the Caribbean Sea. And see our tour guide asking DuPont Primary questions. That's our tour guide. And this is the back of the courthouse. Courthouse that was burnt down by Paul Bogle and the protesters when the governor and the police, and nobody wanted to listen to them. Did you know that the Maroons helped to capture Paul Bogle when they were marching and they went through the market, and then the police was looking for them and the Maroons gave him up? I learned that today. Yes, the burned remains of the courthouse in 1865. This courthouse was burnt down in 1865 by angry protesters, Paul Bogle. They weren't being heard, they weren't getting justice, they did not have a say, nobody wanted to listen to them, they didn't have the rights to their land, they didn't have rights to get proper pay. They had so much disadvantage, and because of what he did, yes, it was a bad thing, but from it came good. The history of Jamaica shows now that we are free. Children are free to go to school. Black children and black people are free to own lands. My students showing me and so on. We have the freedom to do certain things that we did not have before as black people because of Paul Bogle. I remember George William Gordon was hanged too. He was a mulatto, half white. And because he was a deacon and he allowed Paul Bogle to become a Baptist deacon too, they were afraid in England that Paul Bogle would get too much privilege and too much rights and status, because he was linking up with George William Gordon, who was a half white man, because his father was Scottish. He was half white, half black, and he was more noble and more prominent in society. So he was the one who helped Paul Bogle to become a Baptist deacon. And because the two link up and everything now, the persons in England and all of that said that he was causing and enabling and empowering Paul Bogle to become brave, to stand up to the authorities, because they wanted fair treatment. Fair treatment in the courthouse. They wanted to be heard as black people. They wanted better pay. They wanted to own their lands and all of these things. And they weren't being heard. And so it became a big protest. And the courthouse was burned down. Paul Bogle, they were captured, arrested, and hanged. Paul Bogle and George William Gordon. See the burnt remains? Yes, history. This is history. Jamaica's history. Alright? Jamaica's history.
I will tell you the truth, this figure is a lie.
It was more.
It was much, much more than this. So what they do, they try to cover up the damage by telling it was only 437. This was the one, like the bones that they find.
437 remains of
But it was much
our
more
black
than
brothers
this.
and sisters. They died, and they put the bones, all of the bones were put here. The bodies that they found in this spot. So this is the spot where our foreparents, our ancestors who marched for our freedom, their remains are right here. Many of them, and as the tour guide said, it's more than 437. This is the body that they found. This is the number for the bones that they found. They were just lying on the street rotting, and then they found the bones and put their remains here. And here is a monument which reads a little of the history in remembrance of Paul Bogle, George William Gordon, and the 437 Jamaican martyrs of October 1865 who fell because they loved freedom. So 1865 was a very historical, a very important year in our history. Two of our national heroes gave up their life. Well, they were hanged unfairly. So 1865 they died. Paul Bogle and George William Gordon. And this monument says, in gratitude from the generations who now witness that they did not die in vain. October 1965 when this monument was put up. And here we have a view overlooking the beautiful Caribbean Sea. And you can see the guns, the cannon guns, pointing out to the sea. So when the enemy ships were coming in, this fort was to protect Jamaica from the enemy ships. England and Spain waged war over Jamaica, as many of you maybe know. So right here in St. Thomas, we are experiencing history. History of Jamaica, history of St. Thomas. Rough history, a history that is very hard and painful to remember, but it has led to our freedom and led to many things happening for us Jamaicans, that we can have equal rights and justice and fair treatment.